good attendance, because I think it's something we all struggle with. I didn't get to hear Sean's introduction to me, but the important thing is that I've been involved in Montessori for 25 years, and though I don't feel like I'm old enough to be able to say that. My interest in discipline isn't only professional. I am a mom of 3. My children are aged. The eldest is 20. I've got a 17-year-old and I've got a 12-year-old. But despite all of my knowledge about children, and I've had a lot of years of working with children and understanding child development and in Montessori, I also struggle with discipline. I often found myself as a parent at different stages of my children's lives asking, why isn't this working? Am I being too strict? Am I being too lenient? Is this going to discipline? How do I set boundaries without constantly fighting? How do I just get them to do things without fighting? And I think those experiences also led me to explore discipline more deeply, because it is an aspect of the Montessori approach that has always spoken to me, and I think I've spent a lot of time looking at this specifically. But in terms of child development and behaviour and self-regulation as well. But I think what I've learned mostly is that I needed to change my perception of how do I get my child to behave, to what am I helping my child to learn. Sinead, do you have a question?
Sorry, Shamiemah, I just see on the chat that the audio is not great. You keep breaking up with us as you speak. I just thought I'd let you know.
Okay, let me try doing this with a different set of earphones. Maybe that's the problem.
Is someone suggesting it could be because of your headphones? I don't know.
Yes. Often I don't usually work with headphones. You can see that this, but I know that that is something my students don't struggle with. Let me just quickly try to switch.
Okay, that's better.
Yes, for me it is. I don't know if anyone else.
Okay.
See, Poppy's suggesting that you log out and log in again.
Let's just see. Sinead, does it sound better to you, or does it sound the same?
100%. Sounds a lot better.
Okay, awesome. Please interrupt me if okay, so often when I speak to parents today, then I find that they tell me that discipline feels harder today than it was maybe for the generations before them. But what I've realized is 2 things. Number one, it's the first time we're hearing things, the first time we're going through it, so it's natural that it will feel hard. And then the second thing is even if you sorry, like if you have 3 children and you're with your third child, it doesn't mean that it's your third time going through it, because each child brings with it brings their own differences of interpretation and perceptions and personality that you need to deal with. So it's like the first time all over again. But I think that what I also find is that parents struggle with the small things. They're having to repeat themselves so many times. And that's what, it's not always the big things that wear us down. So we feel that we're repeating ourselves all the day, all the time, the whole day. We constantly negotiating. We caught between being too strict or too soft. We're worried about all of the influences on childhood today, the screens, the attention, children's emotional regulation. And then we also work, most of us at least, and then so we come home and we're just exhausted. There isn't much energy left to still be dealing with discipline issues or difficulties that children sometimes present us with. And the reality is that parents are often looking for solutions, but the problem that they're trying to solve is the wrong problem. And I think maybe to just check in, how many of you have said to your own child or the children at school, how many times must I ask, or how many times must I say, whatever the second part is for this week? Maybe if we show our hands or
We've lost you again. I can't hear you at all now, Shamiemah.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Shamiemah.
Shamiemah, we can't hear you.
It is in the evenings with kids all having dinner and shouting and fighting over that. So hopefully you won't hear any of that. But let's go. Okay, so I'm going to, the previous slide, I was just asking how many of you had actually said, how many times must I ask this week? And I'm not sure if you didn't hear that because we only had one response. But I'm going to move back and go and start from scratch with this one because I'm not sure what you heard and what you didn't hear. Okay, so what I was saying is that with discipline, it comes from the word disciple, which means to teach. And it's an important distinction to make between teaching and punishment. So often discipline is associated with punishments, but if you look at the root word of discipline, meaning to teach, and its relation to teaching and learning, it kind of reminds us that when we are disciplining a child, that the focus is to help them develop a capacity that they don't have yet. And so with punishments, what you'll find is that they stop behavior temporarily, and that's not necessarily the same as teaching. So when you are faced with a situation and your instinct is to punish the child, you're usually thinking about, how do I stop this behavior? Or that's what punishment is trying to achieve. Like, I just want to stop the behavior. Whereas with discipline, we ask ourselves, what is the skill that this child is lacking and that this child still needs to learn? So that what we'll find is that when you're using a teaching and learning approach to discipline or to behavior issues, then it's almost taking the longer route, because you have to teach them, and teaching them means that they have to practice the skill before they can master it, whereas punishment can sometimes be more effective on a short-term basis. So I might get the behavior to stop immediately, but there's no guarantee that the behavior won't reoccur at a later stage. And sometimes that behavior will reoccur on an escalated level. So a typical example, it would be when you are in a shopping mall or a shop, any kind of shop, and your child throws a tantrum for sweets, and you give in, and you, if like, okay, this is giving in, but you might, let's say you give in, like reward the tantrum, and you just like, I want her to stop screaming, so I buy the sweets. The next time we've taught, through that action, we've taught the child that the next time they want the sweets, they must make a louder and more intense tantrum in order to achieve what they want. So that's not really what we want. We want to achieve long-term, or we're looking at long-term benefits. And this quote by Vincent Gauman is really good in terms of reminding us of the approach we need to take from a Montessori perspective. It says, education begins the moment we see children as innately wise and capable human beings. Only then can we play along in their world. And it really just reminds us that it's about the way we look at children. And this is what the first part of tonight's talk is going to be about. Okay, so in Montessori, there are very specific goals for discipline. And Montessori called it normalization, or a normalized child. But basically, in essence, it means it relates to a child who has high executive function skills, or well-developed executive function skills. It's a child who can manage themselves, who has self-control, who's able to be responsible, and who can demonstrate respect and consideration of others. Usually it's a child that can be independent as well. So the key thing to remember is that if our goal with discipline or with children was obedience, then we can produce a child who behaves very well when an adult is present. But when the adult is not present, then the child's behavior might change. And, you might see a different type of behavior occurring if the adult is not there. So that's when the control exists externally and with the adult, because the adult is controlling the behavior. Montessori was more concerned about helping the child develop their own inner control, that internal control, where the child gradually moves away from, I behave because I don't want to upset my mom or my teacher, to I know what is right, I can make a choice and I can manage myself. So that's our long-term goal. If there are any questions, feel free to stop me as we go along. Then behavior is communication. So this is an iceberg. I think I got this from Sinead. But it's an iceberg that really is a nice way of looking at what behavior is. Montessori is not the only theorist, but she was one of many theorists who viewed behavior as communication, and made it very clear that when children are giving us a hard time, it's not because they are intentionally trying to give us a hard time. It's actually because they are having a hard time. And the communication or the behavior that we see, like biting, anger, shouting, kicking, tears, tantrums, whatever the behavior is only an hiding or kind of like displaying the part that we can't see is what is causing that behavior. So you need to learn to look beneath the behavior. And often that behavior is caused by anxiety, tiredness, anger, hunger, shame, a feeling of not belonging, So there's a lot of things that could be causing the behavior. Now, what is a very, very important thing to take into consideration that is often misinterpreted in terms of Montessori is that just because we recognize that behavior is a form of communication, and we recognize that the behavior is caused by a feeling like anxiety or anger or tiredness, it doesn't mean that the behavior is acceptable. So our role is still to set limits in order for the child to know what behaviors are acceptable and what behaviors are not acceptable. So, so what we need to do is that before we react to the behavior, we need to become curious. We need to try and figure out what is going on with the child. And so we might pick up that the child is screaming because they're frustrated, or they are repeatedly interrupting conversations because they're struggling to wait. And so the more curious you become, or the more you investigate as to what is causing this behavior, the easier it is for you to realize what is the skill that I need to train or teach this child. And then we also have to be very realistic in our expectations, because often what we are expecting children to be able to do after having told them once, it's not reasonable. I mean, I still find that with adults, you can tell them how many times something, and their behavior doesn't change immediately, or even after months or weeks of repeating yourself. So yet we expect children to do that, So young children cannot consistently do what they cannot yet neurologically do. And so, I've gotten so many messages from people telling me that you couldn't hear me. I'm trusting that you can hear me fine now, Okay,
All good, Shamiemah.
Awesome, thank you. So understanding behavior doesn't mean that we are excusing that behavior. It just means that we are trying to understand what we need to teach. And so we have to be very deliberate when behaviors are unacceptable, and to stop unacceptable behaviors. But then our next move should be to consider, how do we teach the child the skill that they are lacking? And then there's also a question about when is an appropriate moment to teach the child, because in the middle of a meltdown, it is not an appropriate time to teach the child the behavior or the skill that they're lacking. So this reminds us that understanding the importance of development and what is developmentally appropriate it's a very important thing that we need to do. So it's about making that distinction between knowing what to do and being able to do it consistently. So a child, for example, might know that I'm not supposed to hit, but in the moment that they are overwhelmed by anger, they might not yet have the ability to stop themselves or to control their emotions or to physically lash out. A child, for example, might know that they need to pack their school bag, but they still need help developing the planning and organizational skills to actually do it. So it's not enough to just say to them, you need to pack your school bag. Younger children can really do with a checklist, especially an illustrated one, things like that. So we'd put systems in place that support them towards success, to be able to do the thing that they're struggling with. And then very often I find that we expect children to have adult levels of self-control simply because we've told them the rule. So we think that I've told you that we don't hit, or we use gentle hands. A lot of teachers like to use that until the children come back to you and say, I did use my gentle hands to smack him. So we just need to be very conscious about the language that we use when we're communicating with children, but also our expectations and our understanding of their developmental levels. Self-regulation is a developmental thing. It's not something that comes naturally, and especially it's very difficult for young children to achieve. It takes them time to achieve it. And they need repeated opportunities to practice the skill. So we have to teach them the skill, give them the rule by all means, but then allow them time to practice the skill that they need to adhere to it. And when they do break a rule, like hitting someone else, then we do need to stop it immediately. And we need to remind them the rule. The key thing is that when you're stopping a rule, okay, wait, let me first just get into just understanding how the brains process information before I get into how to redirect the behavior. So just very quickly, because we don't have enough time to go into everything related to how the child processes information, but a key function, a key brain type, a brain skill that children have is executive function. And these skills are what help us to stop ourselves from doing something. So our inhibition or our inhibitory control, being able to self-control, to control ourselves. And then working memory is just remembering what we are supposed to be doing. And cognitive flexibility is about how we cope with the change in plan, which explains why young children struggle with transition. So in a classroom situation, they struggle with going from indoor to outdoor. They struggle with coming from home into the classroom. So sometimes you'll see children struggling to separate, or the transition from going from school back home, so that's why you'll sometimes find children crying when they either arrive at school or when they have to leave, because they're actually struggling with the transition and the cognitive flexibility is not yet fully developed. These skills develop through practice, but children also have to be given opportunities to practice it. So it's like if you want children to learn to make decisions, you need to allow them to make decisions, so that they can practice making decisions and learning from decisions that were not great ones. So because of the way, so inhibition, working memory, cognitive flexibility is all linked to it's basically the different types of executive function skills that helps a human being function on a daily basis. And it's the main reason why the Montessori method emphasis is on purposeful activity, that children are given tasks that has a purpose for them, that fulfills an inner need. It's also why the activities have built-in repetition in a lot of them, but also we allow them the freedom to repeat an activity as often as they need to. The Montessori classroom has movement built into it, which is important for developing executive function skills. The children carry things from the shelf to the table or to the floor. They are moving when they are working with things. So there's a lot of movement built into Montessori, not just the type of movement we usually see outdoors. They learn to take responsibility, and we give children a lot of real life experiences in Montessori. All of these lead to the development of executive function skills. And it's important to understand that because these skills take time to develop, and there are lots of things we can put in place to support the development of executive function skills. So we need to ensure that we support them in developing self-control. The hardest part for me has been that in order to teach a child self-control, we as the adults need to be able to model that. And so the more we work on ourselves and learn to control ourselves in stressful situations, the more we're modeling for children, the easier it becomes for them. Okay, so the child who is not yet developmentally ready cannot be disciplined into being ready. So sometimes you find that an adult will increase the consequences because the child isn't doing what is expected of them, or they punish the child. But if the underlying issue is a developmental skill that hasn't been sufficiently developed, then when we increase those severe consequences, we're not necessarily going to solve the problem. If you think about teaching a child to ride a bicycle, you won't shout to them, you should know how to balance by now. You have to teach them and then you have to give them the opportunities to practice. Sometimes they have to fall in order to get back up and try again. So our role when teaching them to ride a bicycle is to provide the support and then slowly step back until they are able to ride independently. And self-regulation or any aspect of discipline or behavior issues works in a very similar way. Our goal is to, or our role is to demonstrate what is required, teach them a skill, give them the support, give them the opportunities they need to practice, and then gradually step back. Okay, so how do we get there? How do we do that? A lot of people associate Montessori with letting children do whatever they want. But in fact, Montessori, she was a huge advocate for children having freedom, but it has to exist within carefully defined limits, clear boundaries. So the environment is prepared to support that type of freedom, and the boundaries are made very clear to children. In a Montessori classroom, freedom is not doing whatever you like. In a Montessori context, so even if you're thinking of a home in which you are implementing Montessori principles, it's not about having the freedom to do whatever you like. It's about the freedom to make choices within clear boundaries. So I know what the boundaries are, and within those boundaries, I'm free to decide or to make or to choose between that. So some examples from a Montessori classroom context is the child can, for example, choose which work they want to do or which work they want to work with. Or they can choose not to do work, but they can't choose to go around and disrupt other people's work. They can't choose to be aggressive or disruptive to other people. So they can choose, I don't feel like doing work now. I want to sit and look out into the garden, or sit and read a book, or, so children have those freedoms, but the freedom comes with the limit of respecting those around you that are working. In a home environment, for example, the child might be able to choose what to wear, but the limits are usually linked to a situation or an event or the occasion or the weather, So in certain weathers, we need to dress appropriately to ensure that we are well covered, or that we can breathe if it's hot, etc. The children also have the freedom to have very strong feelings. We are very big on feelings. It's okay to be angry. Everybody gets angry. We often use that language. We say things like, I can see that you're angry now. It's okay to be angry. And we don't hit our friends. So the rule is that we recognize and acknowledge that feelings are normal and feelings are okay. And it doesn't matter what feelings you're having, those are acceptable. But what is not okay is an inappropriate action because of your feelings. So we teach them from a very young age to separate feelings and action. We focus on, it's okay to be angry and it's not okay to hit. It's okay to be angry or moody, and it's not okay for you not to do your chores. So that balance has to be there. The limit has to be very clearly defined for the child. And then another important thing to understand is that with freedom, if you don't have boundaries for children, then you're not actually creating independence for them, because they don't feel secure. They need that boundaries there to be able to become independent. So the appropriate boundaries is what creates the safety within which independence will develop. And then also when you do have expectations, those expectations must be clear to a child, but it must also be consistent. So you can't change your expectations based on your mood or on the day or on the weather, for example, obviously within context, but you have to be clear on what is allowed and what's not allowed. It can't be changing every single day. I always use this example because this happened in my own family, where we had a grandmother she was just really loved her grandchildren, spoilt them, as we would say, allowed them to do anything. They would jump on her couches and she'd not be upset about it. And then one day it was Eid, and the house had been cleaned and prepared for Eid. And so the kids came and they were jumping on the couches, and she got really upset, and she told them that they're not allowed to jump on the couches. And the kids were really confused because the boundary wasn't clear. They were always allowed to jump on the couches, and they weren't necessary. They were young, they were under 3 years old. They weren't necessarily able to comprehend that now, because it's Eid, we're not allowed to jump on the couches, or because everything's been made pretty, we can't jump on the couches. So it's a simple example of just watching yourself in terms of what your expectations are. And it is quite helpful in a parenting situation for both partners to agree on those boundaries, to even in a teaching situation, if there's two adults working together in a classroom, to write down what your boundaries are for each other, not to share with the children, not to give them, oh, here's your list of clear boundaries. It's about you knowing what those boundaries are to make it easy to know when to reinforce a boundary, when something is okay, when something is not okay. Okay, I just got these 2 red lines on my screen. I don't know if you guys can see it. Okay. So parents often have an enormous list of rules, and teachers, I find teachers do this as well. And usually those lists sound something like don't run, don't shout, don't touch that, don't, you know. But what we need to think about is that we must have fewer rules, but clearer boundaries for children. So think about boundaries that actually really matter. Boundaries around safety, boundaries around respect. There must be care for people and care for the environment. Those are important boundaries, and then we need to learn how to communicate those boundaries clearly. So if you think about those 4 aspects, safety, respect, care of people, care of environment, then there's already lots and lots of rules around it. But we don't need to communicate every single rule. We just need to communicate the boundary, which is that we need to be safe and we need to keep each other safe. So when somebody is, for example, hitting a peer for something, we can reinforce, stop, hitting hurts. Now, depending on the age of the child, I'm thinking now of really young children. No doesn't work and don't doesn't work, because children's brains can't always process negative language. I like to think of the brain as a filing system. So if you think of, like, let's say there's a schema. I don't know if I need to go into this, but your brain has these building blocks, and a schema is like a page where we write down, okay, this is what run looks like, or this is what an elephant is, you know. And so if I said to you, don't think of an elephant, we can immediately start thinking. If I say think of an animal, but don't think of an elephant, then some of us, our brains will go to the elephant first and then think of something else. Now with children, it's basically like their brain taking out that page and saying elephant. Oh, I'm not supposed to think of an elephant. And then they have to put it at the back of their brain, you know, like I mustn't think about this. And that processing speed is not yet well developed for children. So when we say to children, don't run, and they continue running, it's because they first need to think about what is running. Oh, yes, okay, I'm not supposed to run. And so that's the reason why children tend to do the opposite of what you're telling them when you say don't or when you say no. In instances of safety, I prefer using the word stop, because it's so much more effective. It is immediately stopping the behavior, but also directing the child's brain into what they need to do. So, for example, when a child is hitting, kicking, biting, punching, any kind of aggressive behavior, you can just say stop. You can also say stop biting or stop hitting, or, you know, whatever they're doing. And then it's important to reinforce the rule about the fact that these behaviors hurt others, because sometimes children cannot process that. If you want to teach them that hitting hurts by hitting them, then they don't actually learn that either. All that they learn is that, oh, it's not okay for me to hit my baby brother, but it's okay for me to hit someone if, okay, wait, this doesn't sound right now, but it's not okay for me to bite others, but it's okay for me to, if I was older and bigger and more powerful, then I can bite, because that's what the parent is doing when they're biting back. So what you're really wanting to do is to just say it in a very calm voice. Stop, biting hurts. And then you can go on to say, I need to keep you and Johnny safe, or I need to make sure that, that he doesn't get hurt, something along those lines, just kind of reinforcing that. I wanted to say something, and it's just slipped my mind completely. Okay, so just one thing is, I wanted to talk about my sunny day. I really struggled with this in the early years. I think I still struggle with it, because I still kind of get my kids back up when I speak to them, only to my children. Now, no one else. I can do this well with everyone else. But the thing is that there's something about my voice that triggers my children. So I'm not scolding them, but they interpret my tone of voice, my body language, my, words as a scolding sometimes. And I've had to practice changing that tone of voice. And the thing that I found most effective was, if I needed to communicate a boundary, I would very quietly in my head say, it's a sunny day outside today. And the reason I would do this is because it's a very neutral statement. It's just a fact, like whatever the weather is. It's a sunny day outside today. And that would help me to remember the tone of voice I'm supposed to have when I am reinforcing a boundary. Now, often our boundaries are reinforced as a scolding. We're scolding the child because they're not listening. We're scolding the child because they have not behaved themselves or whatever. And so we need to think back, come back a bit and then think about how we bring this message across. Then another important concept to recognize is that children need connection before we correct them. So when a child is dysregulated, it's not the right moment for them to be able to get a lesson. You can say something like, I know, like let's say the child is hitting or throwing a tantrum or hitting you. You can say something like, I know you're very angry. It's okay to be angry. I'm here and I won't let you hit me. I'm here. I'm ready for you. I'm able to listen to you. In a way that you're showing compassion and firmness. You are reinforcing that feelings are okay. And you are reinforcing the rule that that doesn't give you the right to behave in a certain way. A key tool to you in terms of language is to steer away from using the word but and to replace it with and. So I can see that you're angry and it's okay to be angry. Instead of saying, but I won't let you hit me, you say, and I won't let you hit me, because but has the ability to construct walls, it gets your defenses up. And so instead of saying but, you say and it keeps the door open for connection as well, for the child to be able to hear the boundary more clearly. When children are dysregulated, our first role is to help them to become calm. Once they are calm and in a regulated state, then we can address what has happened. Because while they are dysregulated, they cannot understand, they cannot process the lesson anyway. So it's falling on deaf ears. And that brings us to our role in the Montessori environment. The adult is regarded, in the Montessori philosophy, the adult is regarded as an important part of the environment. Montessori also speak about preparing the environment, but we also speak about preparing yourself as an adult, which often requires a lot of reflective work, looking within, She called it spiritual preparation, and it refers to preparing your spirit. So looking within and recognizing what are the things that I'm insecure about, what are the things that triggers me, what are the things that I'm really fussy about, and just recognizing it, and then working on what she called our I can't get to the word now, but what our defect, so what is the issues that we have? Can we improve that? Can we learn to self-regulate ourselves as well and be respectful in the way we speak to children? It is impossible to change anyone else but yourself. So often we work on changing the child, but it's really difficult to do that. Our focus should be on changing the environment and changing ourselves, looking at what we can do differently to in order to support the child first. Okay. So sometimes we have to also look at ourselves and consider, how do we respond when children make a mistake? How do we respond when we make a mistake? So what is it that the child is experiencing when we do something wrong? Do we shout? Do we blame others? Do we apologize? Do we speak about our issues? How do we handle frustration? And this is the part that if we're wanting to see children who are regulated or who are able to regulate themselves, we need to show them what regulation looks like. So we need to model that behavior. We need to be able to go back to a child and say, I was very frustrated, and I'm really sorry that I shouted. I should have spoken calmly. So we can make the mistake, but it's about how we come back from the mistake when we do that. Sorry if I'm speaking too fast. I'm just realizing that time's almost up and we've had a few technical issues, but I will try not to speak too fast and at least give you some good things to take home with you. And this, if there's one thing that you take home with you tonight, it should be this, because it's something we as adults are very guilty of. We need to say less, speak, because normally when we're frustrated, or generally, we tend to talk more. We explain, we lecture, we threaten, we negotiate, we repeat ourselves to the point that the child switches off. Obviously, this is a huge generalization. I know of a lot of people who, when they're frustrated, they actually withdraw and do everything, process everything internally, which is also not healthy. But still, when we do find ourselves using more words, the child eventually switches off. They're not listening to those explanations anymore. So what we have to become friends with is silence. We also have to learn to use fewer words. So put yourself or regulate yourself to a calm state so that you have a calm presence, and then just say what must be heard. It's time to leave. And then you pause and you be quiet and allow the message to filter for the child. If you can say, you can walk or I can carry you, would you like to walk or would you like me to carry you? Would you like me to hold my hand? Would you like to hold my hand, or would you like to walk by yourself? So you're giving the child a bit of a choice. It helps them with that transition as well. But calm, clear language combined with action is really a lot more effective than any long explanation. And then give the child time to respond. So don't be too quick to jump in and direct them. With Montessori, we don't talk about no consequences. It really is about what are the types of consequences we're using. I'm going to just touch on this very briefly. A natural consequence, so just a quick definition, a natural consequence is something that happens without the adult imposing it. So for example, if you don't put your jacket on, you're going to feel cold. If you don't have an umbrella, you're going to get wet. So those are natural consequences. It happens whether or not the adult does something about it. A logical consequence is deliberately connected to the behavior. So if you misuse something, you're going to need to put it away or for a while, or you're going to have to try again later, and then we'll see if you can use it appropriately. The key is that the consequence must help the child develop responsibility and not make them suffer. And this is something that it's a very fine line, because a lot of people, adults, get this wrong, where the consequence is actually just a disguise for the word consequence is a disguise for a punishment. So it's not about, I'm taking this away from you to punish you. I'm taking this away for you and giving you a moment, and then we're going to try again. So the minute you can, you're going to give it to them and say, okay, are you ready to try again? Or come and tell me when you're ready to try again. So it's about sometimes pausing and then coming back and say, okay, let's try that again. And punishments are absolutely not okay in a Montessori context. We don't want it's not about causing them discomfort or making them suffer, because we believe that it doesn't change their behavior. It's a very temporary experience that they have. So the key question we need to ask in deciding how do we respond to our behaviors is, what is going to help my child learn? What is going to get them to be able to grow from this experience? The first thing is to allow them to develop skills to become independent. So they need opportunities to practice dressing, tidying up, helping. They must build responsibility, and we do it from a very young age. They're not, on one hand, they're learning life skills, but really what they're learning through chores and through being able to do things for themselves is they're learning to pay attention, to build their concentration. Their working memory is developing. They learn how to control themselves and how to deal with frustrations or problem solve. They learn to plan. So all of these things develop through giving children purposeful work, opportunities to develop independence. And some examples would be things like dressing themselves, preparing a snack depending on the age, preparing food, setting the table, and then teaching them to care for their belongings, that you are responsible for taking your things to school and making sure you put it back in your bag and bringing it home. Teaching them to pack away things that they've worked with. And then bearing in mind that repetition leads to mastery and mastery leads to confidence. So we need to give children basic responsibilities and then allow them to repeat those responsibilities, to practice it, and eventually to master it. And then before you react, pause. If anything happens, pause, stop, ask yourself, is my expectation age appropriate? Or am I expecting too much? What is my child communicating? Sorry, guys, this background noise. What is my child trying to communicate with me? What is this behavior telling me about them? What skill is lacking? What do they need to develop? Do they need help learning how to wait their turn? Do they need help learning how to manage frustration or how to express anger? What can I teach them instead? Instead of punishing them, what is it that I need to teach them? So you don't need to analyze every single tantrum. It's just a useful mental reset when you're about to react inappropriately. So you're about to shout or scream or lose your cool, then it's the perfect opportunity for you to pause and think about, am I being fair here? Is this a reasonable request? And then just to go through this, think about one behavior that you find is recurring at home, and then silently run it through these 4 questions, and then see if there's a way that you can move forward from there, if it does make a difference. So we are not trying to produce children who are quiet, compliant, and convenient. We are raising future adults. We want children who are able to think for themselves, who can make appropriate choices, who can deal with frustration, so they can build some level of resilience. It's good for children to be bored, to be able to experience a little bit of frustration and to figure out solutions from that point. They need to learn how to persist when something is difficult, or how to take responsibility for their actions, how to be considerate of others, how to manage themselves when there isn't an adult standing over them. That is really Montessori's vision of discipline. It's about children who have self-control and who are self-disciplined, who can manage themselves. And then just in terms of what can you do differently tomorrow or tonight even, the first is to learn to give children choices. When you do, give them two acceptable choices rather than asking open-ended questions. For example, when it comes to tomorrow, hopefully not, I mean, now it will be tomorrow morning. If your child's dressing for school, give them a choice. Would you like to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? Giving them some level of independence within a boundary is really helpful for children, but also limiting the choices helps them to develop the ability to make choices. So we start off with two acceptable choices, and then as they develop the ability to make the choices, we can increase it to what outfit would you like to wear ideally tomorrow for school, so they're packing their clothing right the night before, and we don't have the morning rush drama. Involve children in real work from a very young age. If you're cooking rice, let the children pour the rice or put the water in, for example. Allow them to set the table. If they're not old enough to set the full table, you collaborate. So the toddlers collaborate with us. We do a bit, they do a bit. So we ask them, can you bring the cups to the table? I'll put the plates on the table, things like that. Create, that's meant to say create predictable routines. Children must know what routines are. Like, for example, we wake up, we wash our face, we use the toilet, we brush our teeth, we have breakfast, we go to school. The afternoon, who's fetching me from school? I come home, I maybe have some time to play, I have dinner, then a bath, then story, then a bed. Whatever your routine is, they need to know that, and it really works in helping them to regulate. Try to prepare instead of constantly correcting them. So think ahead. If you know your child struggles, prepare them. Like, let's say you go on a play date and they struggle to leave, prepare them by giving them a 5-minute warning. Prepare the environment the night before. If you can, pack your bags for school the night before, pack your lunch before. And then say less if you can, and focus on connecting before correcting, recognizing or acknowledging your child's emotions, validating their feelings, and separating feelings from action. So feelings are okay, but there's certain behaviors that we can accept and certain behaviors that we cannot accept. So you are angry right now. It is okay for you to go to your room until you feel calm, or to sit here next to me, and you don't have to separate from the child. It's not a time out where I'm sending you to your room to deal with your feelings on your own. I'm right here with you, and I'm going to support you until you feel calm, and then we can deal with what behaviors are okay. And lastly, to follow through consistently. Sean, how are we doing in terms of time?
Well, I think it's fantastic. I'm sure everybody's prepared to carry on listening to you. So, but I'm sure we can give another few minutes, because I think you're giving so much valuable advice.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I think we can, it's the last slide is just a thank you slide. So I've actually got two. Just in ending, I want to remind parents that discipline is not about controlling children. Our goal isn't obedience, it's really self-discipline. And unfortunately, the goal of self-discipline is the longer journey. It does take longer to achieve. It is the harder, it's really hard to achieve that, because the easy solution is to punish or reward a child and get the behavior you want. And sometimes maybe I guess that's effective if you want your children to behave really well because the in-laws are coming over. You might give them some device time so they can sit quietly and look like good angels. But generally, you want children that can go out in the world and can manage themselves. And so when we're doing that, we have to sit through the difficult moments and be there for them, and then support them to develop the skills that they need. We need to teach them how to control themselves, but it also means that we have to work on ourselves and learn how to control ourselves when we get angry and upset, and when we are frustrated or hungry or tired and we don't have the energy. How do we manage those situations? For example, do we model and say, you know what, I'm really not in a good space right now. I'm going to bed, or I'm going to my room and I just need to calm down, or I'm going to have a glass of water because I need to calm down, and then we can speak. Try your best to understand the behavior, but make sure that you set clear limits in terms of what is allowed and what's not allowed. Teach children skills. They need to learn how to do things. They need to learn how to negotiate, how to express their feelings, how to express it verbally, without fighting, or physically expressing feelings. And then give them opportunities to practice. Learn to step back. In terms of opportunities to practice, sibling rivalry is one of the best rooms in which you can do that, because it's a safe space for children to learn how to deal with people that are going to be difficult with them, etc. We can't constantly intervene with sibling rivalry, telling children that give in, he's younger than you, or shame, she's a girl, allow her to do that. We have to teach them how to set their own personal boundaries, and sibling rivalry does actually give us a space to do that. Connection, make sure that you understand before reacting. Make sure children have clear boundaries, they need limits. Be consistent, because calm follow-through matters. Give them opportunities to practice. Self-regulation really develops through experience. And lastly, remember that with independence, it's a responsibility that builds capability. When children are allowed to do things for themselves, they become independent and they build confidence, which is what they need to go through life. So my final point for tonight is that behavior is temporary. And so whatever behavior you're dealing with, it's going to pass. The character that is being developed is lifelong. So the character will remain behind. And punishments and rewards do not do well for children's characters. It is a worthy investment to work towards developing children who are self-disciplined. Every single response that we choose is an opportunity to teach the child not just what they need to do, but to help in developing who that child is becoming. So it is a long-term investment, and could be hard work, but it really is worth it in the end. Okay, thank you. I did manage to finish just 5 minutes over. Are there any questions? If there's time for questions.
Any questions?
Oh,
That was fantastic, though, Shamiemah.
Yes, thank you.
Shukran, Shamiemah. I guess I don't want to keep everyone on for too long, but I'm just sitting in your presentation and thinking as a parent. And everything you've said is kind of what I'm struggling with my 4-year-old at the moment. And I just had an experience this evening, and you've just reflected on so many things that are thought-provoking for me right now in this moment. That, we're cutting the nap because he's almost 5, and he's, when he naps, it's affecting his evening routine, but when he doesn't nap, it's affecting the afternoon routine. So I'm kind of trying to find that balance. And just this afternoon, we had an experience, and the same, I tried to do everything that you were saying, just, regulate myself, make the boundaries clear, be precise. But also what I found myself in doing which I think is so natural as a parent. And if many people on here as educators too, if we work with children all day, it's very, very hard to switch off from working with children all day to then being a mom, right? And I found everything you said this evening just very, very informative on how I can be more present and more reflective as a parent, right? Because yes, he had a tantrum. He was melting down because he didn't want to carry his bag of chips that he wanted. I bought for him, but he didn't want to carry it. And my hands were full with his bag, with the groceries, with everything, and trying to talk to my 4-year-old who hasn't had a nap, who's had a long day at work, and trying to explain to him that you need to carry the chips. You want the chips. And I was just very proud of myself in this moment in being like, no, I'm not going to carry the chips for you. This is something you wanted. You need them, so you're going to bring them into the house. And I was so embarrassed, Shamiemah, like walking into my house, he is crying and screaming, Mommy, please carry the chips. Like it was just, I felt in that moment like such a failure. This has been a long day. And I carried through. I just said, no, I'm not carrying.
It's really difficult, especially for teachers, because we do get tired and there's a lot that is expected of us. But when my daughter, my youngest is 12, so it's been a long time ago that I had a 4-year-old. But I do recall a phrase I often used, which was, you don't need to sleep, but you need to rest your body. So when I was transitioning her from the afternoon nap, I actually made her sit down and rest, so it wasn't necessarily a nap. Sometimes it would be on a, like lay down on the couch or something like that, and then she'd fall asleep, but then I'd time it and I'd literally wake her up after 15 or 20 minutes. So it was meant to be a power nap and not always like a wake up, because sometimes then that gets you a new tantrum, but just sitting or making a noise around them or rubbing their back or something, and like cuddling, something along those lines. Thank you. Michelle?
Hello there. It's actually Anthony here. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Oh, wonderful. I was something that thank you very much. Some wonderful pointers and some lovely reframing of sort of way of sort of looking at behaviors. About what do we need to be teaching. It's been really actually sort of eye-opening and much appreciated. One thing I was wanting to ask was specifically when you have behaviors that are approaching boundaries. Something that I typically do is I will keep repeating, in our case, Ava's name until she makes eye contact. I will then give the instruction that, or not the instruction, or my explanation as to why we're getting close to a boundary behavior. But this also starts feeling a bit silly sometimes, where I'm sitting there going, Ava. What's your thought process on that? Is that how do you ensure you've got the child's attention when you're approaching a boundary thing without becoming effectively just repeating yourself?
Yeah, can you give me an example of what you mean by approaching a boundary? Like, give me just any whatever.
Say for instance, she'll be sitting with her younger brother, and we have a boundary that her things are her things and his things are his things, and that she is not to snatch things from his hand. She will start then sort of taking things from him, which will start a tantrum throughout. And my response will be sort of, Ava, do not take your brother's toys. Sorry, yes. But then she won't make eye contact. She won't acknowledge me. The behavior will continue until I repeat myself a few times, generally with a slightly increasing tone of voice. What are your thoughts on that?
Just give me a minute. I'm going to respond to you. I just want to just address everyone else quickly. So I'm happy to stay on and answer a few more questions. And if anybody wants to leave, please feel free, including you, Sean, because I think you'll still get the recording either way, because I'm very mindful that we've taken up quite a few people's time. So whoever wants to log off, I really won't feel offended by it. And then if you're okay, I'm going to respond. Is it Anthony you said, hey?
Yes, Anthony.
Anthony. Okay, so I'm also not judging you when I'm giving you this response. So please don't take it like that. I've been in that situation myself.
No, not at all.
It's just that when you do the Ava, it's taking you, I'm assuming, a lot more Avas to get her eye contact, because she's learning that he's going to say my name until I feel like looking, so it's not as effective as saying it once. Now, the expectation for her not to snatch things from her brother is also a little bit, how old is she? About 5? You said?
4.5.
4.5. And the brother?
2.
2, yeah.
He's 2.5 and she's 4.
Yeah. So the expectation is also not very realistic, because children at this age haven't really yet fully developed the ability to share or to separate even, so they can play collaboratively, but not always, like with each other. They're not always able to share, and then sometimes also not always able to separate and not play together. So one of the things I wanted to just say was, with sharing, I don't like to force children to share, because I don't believe that we should force them. But at the same time, we need to teach them boundaries. So instead of saying, don't snatch something from your brother, you might say that if you want something, you need to ask for it. And then we also have to consider the way that we set up the space that they're playing in. So in a Montessori classroom, for example, each child has their own work mat, or not their own, but when they're working on the floor, they take out a work mat. When they're working at the table, they take a table mat. And so the mat defines their workspace, and all their materials, whatever they're working with, is on that space. And so if you want to work with things in my workspace, you need to ask me. So you can say, Ava, please can I work with you? Or please can I play with your toys? And Ava also has, in that moment, the right to say, no, I'd like to work with this by myself today. But we teach them how to do that respectfully. So just quickly, in terms of how to respond, I would slow down with the number of Avas. It is harder work, but it might mean going up to her, putting your hand on her shoulder and saying, Ava, like looking her in the eye, once, saying her name. Her names are very effective in getting their attention, but repeating the names could change the behavior to, I'll just wait until I'm ready, because he'll repeat himself until I'm ready.
That's what I was slightly concerned about.
Yeah. And then the other thing that's very effective that teachers often use is changing your volume, so like if you watch movies, the teacher that struggles always is shouting at the children to keep quiet, and no one ever listens to them. But the teacher that is effective is the one that walks into the classroom and just keeps quiet and makes their presence known, so lowering your voice sometimes forces the child to listen. So, and then also avoid scolding or saying, don't snatch your brother's toys, or saying like that. You can just not always preempt that's what she's going to do, but rather trust that she will do the right thing sometimes. So for example, you reinforce that if you want to play with his toys, you need to ask him, and then you might need to say, he has said no, you can't play with it, so you'll have to wait till he's done, or whatever it is. But give her a chance. And then if she does still break the boundary, you must allow it sometimes, because that's part of practicing, to learn that, this is not acceptable. Then you say, Ava, remember we said that if you want to play with your brother's toys, that you need to ask him. Do you want to practice asking him? Let's give it back to him. Do you want to practice asking him? And so in that way, it becomes more long-term, more of a long-term learning lesson for the child.
No, thank you. No, as I say, I'd suspected that the constant repetition of a name wasn't a brilliant way of doing it. But yeah, no, that seems like a very good way of approaching it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Okay, I think that's all.
Thank you, Shamiemah.
Pleasure.
Well, it's been fantastic evening. Thank you, Shamiemah. I
Oh,
think
it's a pleasure.
everyone's benefited somewhere, and I think even for someone as old as me, it's good to hear it all again and to have little
Yeah.
reminders. Oh dear, I've forgotten about that one. So thank you, and it was wonderful.
Oh,
And
it's a
good night,
pleasure.
everyone. Thank you for coming.
Good night.
And yeah, I'd
Good night,
love to say we're
Shamiemah.
going to have Shamiemah back again next week, but I know we're not. So but it was lovely. Thank you, Shamiemah.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.